Hello, welcome to Principles of Macroeconomics. This is lecture 4, and today we're going to talk about income and production. Please go to Lolima, download the slides for lecture 4. That will help you to navigate what I'm talking about. So we start with the household income. One of the basic economic indicators is how much money you make. And because there are children, there are students too that are not working, there are senior people that are not working, it's very hard to calculate, to have a per person indicator of how much money a person makes, because some, like actually a huge part of population, do not make money. So what we use is called household income, which is basically a large family income. So we calculate income of the entire family with children, seniors kind of combined together, and that's named household income. That gives us a perspective how we how rich we are in terms of a family. And it also gives perspective, if you're a single working person, that's how much money you can make. But if you're a family and two people work and you have another 4 people that don't work, as an example, that you divide the same amount of income along large amount of people. So household income is good in these terms. It tells you how much money people that work basically make. And we use 2 different averages, center indicators, as you may have heard in statistic, to get it. So it's quite important for you to recall if you knew it, or if you don't know what is median. I'm going to explain you, but it's quite hard to do through videos. So if you don't get it, please go to Wikipedia, just type median and read an article, watch YouTube video how calculate median and average and what's the difference. So average is more or less mostly used in pretty much everywhere else, so I hope you have any idea what it is. So if you have 3 people or 3 indicators, x1, x2, x3, let's say we have a person that earns $10,000, a person that earns $20,000, and a person that earns $30,000. So we have 10, 20, and 30. Average will be 10 plus 20 plus 30 divided by 3. So 10 plus 20 plus 30 will be 60. If we divide by 3, it will be 20. So average will be $20,000. Now that's hopefully clear. Median is something less less clear. So when we calculate median, actually we don't really calculate it, we find it. So we order or rank our data in descending or ascending order, it doesn't really matter, but in certain order from largest to smallest, let's say. So in this case, we would rank 30,000, 20,000, and 10,000. And then we pick up the one in the middle. We do not calculate anything, which for some of you might be a good news actually. We just pick up the middle one. Now if you have 4 things, then you don't have a middle one. That is solved by calculating an average of the 2 in the middle. So if you have x1, x2, x3, and x4, median will be an average of x2 and x3. So x2 plus x3 divided by 2. And in this case, in the case of 10, 20, and 30,000, so 30, 20, 10, you throw away 30, throw away 10, you pick up the middle, it will be again $20,000. But why we use it for income? Because the real distribution looks like X1 will be $10,000, another person owns $20,000, another person owns $100,000. So we have a few very rich people in the United States, but in other countries that's true as well. That skew basically shift the average way higher. So let's calculate. If we have 10, 20, and 100, what will be the average? So 10 plus 20 plus 100, it's 130. Okay, not 130. Okay, we can divide it by 3. Let me see on calculator, because the number is not that good. So it's 10, 20, and 100 will give us 130 divided by 3, which is $43,000. Now, you can imagine it's not very representative number. If I tell you average income is 43,000, it looks like high, but for people who earn 10 and 20, that doesn't tell how they live at all, because they don't have 40,000 at all. And so what we want to know is median, in this case, will be very different. 10, 20, 100. We throw away 100, we throw away 10, and it will be still 20. Now, 20 is the number of an income of an actual person in the middle. So it is median income is also known as income of an average person. Not an average income, but income of an average person, and it is more representative. We just pick up a guy in the middle out of family, in this case, household income. So we just pick up an average American family and see how much money they make. And that makes way more sense to see if we just take all the income within the United States and then just divide by number of families in United States. That number, because of few rich families, will be too high for majority of US families. So that would be like upsetting for most people, such indicator, because when you want to look of your median income, you want to compare yourself to that. And if it's too high, then you say, oh, I'm poor. But in fact, you might be actually in like top 60 or 70%. So you might be way above that average person or average family, but still be below average income calculations. So with all of this, hopefully it is clear a little bit, at least. We use this median, an income of a selected average family, to justify and compare countries, compare that in time. So what we do with the income, we compare that with different countries and we compare that in time. So below you have links to some data. Go ahead and open them. You have average wage. You have list of countries by average wage. This to show a very positive statistic about United States, as we are in number 2 if you rank by PPP. Now, PPP is purchase power parity, which basically brings different countries to one that consumer basket. So remember inflation, that same basket is used now with a price level. So you price how much food cost in, let's say, Switzerland, how much clothes cost in Switzerland, and you bring it to US prices. US is the baseline. So if you look at United States, you see PPP and nominal are equal. That's because United States nominal is used as a baseline for PPP. Now nominal is that actual amount of money they make. So you can see Switzerland is below US if you rank by PPP, but it's actually people there earn $85.7 thousand, so way higher than 60 in United States. But just the prices in Switzerland are so high that it pushes down way below United States. Then you can see other countries like Germany, number 13, France. They're doing way worse in terms of average wage. But looking forward, we're gonna discuss that in coming around in the middle of the course. In European countries as well as in Japan and pretty much all other developed countries, you have a lot of stuff for free. So this income or average wage is not that representative, unfortunately. Or fortunately, it depends how you look at it, but for statistical and economic analysis purposes, it's unfortunate because we cannot just say, oh, Germany is like 20% worse than United States because people there make 10,000 less money than here, or more than 10,000 actually. It's not exactly comparable because healthcare and education are free in Germany, or close to free at least, way less, cost way less than in United States. So yes, you have higher income, but also you have a different economic structure, which makes this comparison very problematic. And that's part of what we will learn in this course, that for now we are talking about things that we can easily quantify. Income, it comes with a paycheck in dollars. It's easy to quantify and visualize. But we're going to talk about healthcare and education. Those things are pretty much impossible to quantify. It's a very qualitative thing. So it's very hard to compare different countries just using numbers. We need to have a picture of the type of economy, and the best way is to actually live in both countries, and then you can compare and say, well, if you live there, you got those type of benefits and those things are good. If you live here, those things are good. So, but within the course, I'll try to show you the qualitative part as well, so you can have a more balanced vision and not just see that US income is high, so we are second best in the entire world after tiny Luxembourg. It's a bit more complicated than that. Now if you click on median income link, brings you to list of countries by median income. And you can see that United States is number 6. So we have a bunch of European countries, Northern European countries, and Australia bypass us. Now why this has happened, I just explained you. Median income is this an income of an average guy, which means there is simply more rich people in United States, really rich people, than in those countries. And so if we take an average guy in your average family in United States, they're doing pretty well, but they're number 6 in the world, not number 2. And people in Australia, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and same Luxembourg, they are doing better than in US. However, still pretty high, better than Canada, Germany, Japan, so it's pretty good result. Now please open the next link related to median income, and this is a comparison in time. Now you can read something here, but what I want you to go to recent trends and see on the right graph. So you click on the graph, and you have a blue line that represents GDP, and you have a red line that represents median income. So you can see it's real median income means it's adjusted for inflation. We're going to learn what it is later. But in simple words, we compare GDP growth to income growth. And what we see is a very interesting pattern. We see that GDP and the blue line grows quite fast in recent terms. There are up and downs, there are certain crises, but the dynamic is quite good. While income, there was growth in 90s, but if you start from 2000 up to 2016, there was actually zero growth. So for 16 years, there was mostly, income went down, and only in recent years we catch up with that level. Well, GDP increased a lot, and that's actually a very serious problem. That I know it's an introductory class, and you're supposed to maybe you think you will see only something simple, but I want to give you some real life problems. So this problem is so complicated that even top economists couldn't figure out what's going on. They have some theories, of course, ideas, but no solutions, and that's an issue. We have very low income growth, median income growth in United States compared to other countries, even though we have a high level of income growth, but a high level of income, but the pattern for the last 20 years is not very good. So we might be better off compared to other countries, but we are, in terms of relative comparison, we are worse off than the previous generation in their income. So they were much better compared to us in terms of income. And that's a problem, even though, again, compared to other countries, we are quite good, but that's, as I mentioned, there are certain qualitative differences there. Now let's move to production. So industrial production and why it is important. We have certain, as I mentioned in the first lecture, we have certain types of economy. Certain parts of the economic activity. So we have industrial production, we have agricultural production, we have services provided by business, private business, and we have government services. Services provided by private business is mostly trade and transportation, tourism. Those are the major ones. Industrial production is only around less than 12% for the United States of overall economy. Agricultural production is just 1% of the overall economy. So why talk about it? Even though it's a small part of the economy, if you imagine how economy works, the trade, as I mentioned before, is 40% of the economy. So maybe we should talk about internal trade, but we don't, because what we trade things that we produce. So if you take, let's say, a car, and the car was produced first, then it goes to dealership, and they add a price, add this GDP, added value that goes to GDP. But the key, the starting point is the production. So we either produce or we import from other countries. And import, as we already know, is a bad thing, just to simplify. So industrial production is the starting point of something good. And again, we try to find indicators that tells us something about the future of the economy and the dynamics of the economy. So industrial production and agricultural production, they are very small, but very powerful in terms of telling where we're going to go with other things, because trade and finance and services highly relate on actual goods, and those goods are first produced. And agriculture particularly important because it's food production. It's related to food production, and even though it's very small, but if there is certain climate problems and there is a problem with supply of agriculture, we might have a severe crisis. So that's one small thing that is so important, that each country, even developed countries, try to keep agriculture running, even though from economic perspective it's not beneficial for developed countries, because the cost of labor is very high in developed countries. So it's better to produce agriculture goods and import them. That's one of the basic economic strategies. But even developed countries, not just US, because US has actually a lot of not developed parts of US where it makes sense for an agriculture, but countries like heavily industrialized countries like Germany and Japan, they still support their agriculture. There, it's really not profitable. The government pays to like a small farmer, I believe around $1 million in subsidies a year. So basically, they pay their farmers to do the farming because it's so not profitable, and they pay quite a lot of money. So, but why? Why they do that? Because they each country realize that's something strategic. If you rely, if you're, let's say you import all your food from Latin America, and suddenly there is a political change in Latin America, and suddenly they, if you're Germany and you import from Latin America, let's say, suddenly they hate Germany and they don't want to sell you food, and you destroyed all local production. You're gonna die, basically, you're gonna starve. That is not acceptable for any country. So all the countries, they try to at least maintain the basic food, and Germany maintains again grain production, all those basic things you can find in Germany. It's highly industrialized, but it's still way not profitable actually. So there are government subsidies to those fields. In US, there are government subsidies and support to farmers as well. They still make more money because of lower wages, minimal wages. So farmers work with people with a minimal wage, and in Europe and Germany, it's way higher than in the United States. So the German farmers face way more problems, but they have a better government support. So in the United States, you can still be profitable due to low price of labor, but still it's not that profitable as if you try to compete with, Philippines, Indonesia, Mexico, Argentina, even with, $3 an hour, which would be ridiculous for United States, it's still tons of money for developing countries. So you cannot compete with that. That's why we have support, but that's important for their stability. So that's about agriculture. Industrial production is even more important in economic terms because that's starting point for overall economic activity aside of importing things. And so we can go to the next slide and you will see we have a mainstream view and we have a realistic view. Mainstream is that economic theory that you can find in any textbook on macroeconomics. And you still need to know it, even though it's probably not very helpful if you don't go to be an economic major. And if you do just business major, that's there is quite high chance that you will not need this simplified view. But for set up a future perspective, and that's what in the textbooks typically. So you still need to know that, and it helps to have at least certain simple model that you can play around and so on. So in this simple model, production is viewed in the form of function, mathematical function, and we have y is our output or production, and then it is a certain function of two variables. We have capital and labor. So in this simplified view, we have only capital, which is basically money or investments, and labor, that are people. There is an assumption of competitive environment. So I talked already about competition, and that's essential. So we assume, unfortunately, that's a drag of mainstream view, a lot of assumptions. So we just assume that there is competition. And in this assumption, companies or firms, they do not make any profit, because in competitive environment, all the benefits go to consumers, and companies basically are left only with enough capital to exist, but nothing with extra profit. That's assumption. So that's not part of a result or something. That's just an assumption of this theory. And labor and capital, the two factors combined in this function form. There is, as you can see, y equal to ak in the power of alpha multiplied by L in the power of 1 minus alpha. That is known as Cobb-Douglas production function. Now, we will not use it in this course. For the 300 level macro, that is used quite heavily, and in general in economic theory, the production function are used heavily, and specifically this one. This weird form was chosen because of its mathematical properties. So it's a weird strategy, I would say, to choose a functional form based on mathematics. But because the entire theory is mathematical, without these properties, you won't have any balanced theory. You won't have any mathematical results. Luckily, also this functional form was tested by Cobb and Douglas and proved to be quite realistic. But the problem with the test that it took place, I believe, in 30s or 50s, but it was so long ago that when we used to have a very simple economy. We had industry and we had agriculture. We have physical labor, and one of the assumptions is that everyone is the same. Everyone who is working have the same set of skills. And so back in 30s and 40s, it's all physical work. Even if if you were farmer and then you try to be a coal miner, you were a coal miner and you switch to steel manufacturing. Those were the type of jobs. They're all different, but you can switch relatively fast. Maybe in 1 month you can master basic skills, and that's it. You're ready to go for your new job. So it was relatively true, especially on the annual perspective as we test. So within a year, the labor is quite flexible between the industries, and so you do you do see where their opportunities are, and that's where labor can go. And all those industries were heavily capital intensive, so you need a lot of capital to do anything in that environment. And that's how this mainstream view looks like. Now, what's a realistic view is basically a critics and what things are not true from that view nowadays. First, firms do make profit, and that's actually a good thing because corporate profit is a source of investment and development. So that model, part of the problem with that model is that if companies won't make profit, then how we actually gonna grow? If every market will be, competitive, there will be very limited source of ridiculous type of investments in brand new things, like Elon Musk, for example. If his companies were in competitive markets and he didn't get any profit, how he would build Tesla or SpaceX? Such innovative things, they are very risky. There is no guarantee he would actually build Tesla. Even he would say that he didn't. He had a vision, but there are a lot of problems on the way and a lot of challenges. Even actually now, there are a lot of challenges with that business. So if firms were not making profits, we would have completely different economy, more stable economy maybe, but very boring economy without any innovative things. And it used to be like that 100 years ago. That's why the theory used to work. But that's not the world we live in now. And if we also look in corporate profits, sometimes they make excessive profits, way larger, and that's a sign of monopoly. So remember, we were talking, monopoly is the key, and excessive profits is a sign of monopolic position. So, as like that example with glasses, you might have a lot of brands, and you might not see the monopolist there on the top because it's kind of hidden behind the brands. But what you look at this is a profits rate, and if the profits rate is too high, this is the sign of monopoly, monopolic power. So that is important. The firms profit, what companies actually make profit, do they make profit because they invest in innovations like IT industry is very innovative, or they make profit because they monopolize the industry and they do not innovate, they just abuse consumers in economic terms. So that is for the government to actually look and decide, and it's not done properly, to be honest, but in theory that's how it should be. So the government should look and see whether there is abuse, the companies abuse consumers, and or there is a certain fair, let's say the company invested in innovation, get this innovative product, and that's why it makes profit. Then it's kind of honest achievement of a company. And second one is that second problem, as you may guess, we are no longer living in the world where labor is homogeneous. So homogeneous is a complicated word for everyone is the same, or everyone has the same set of skills. Now we live in the world where skills actually matter. Probably is the most that matter, not the quantity of people. So before we had a very weird theory. We had that the more people you have, the better. So China with 1.5 billion or 1.4 billion, India with over a billion people, those should be the most successful countries because they have tons of people, according to that theory. But what actually if we imagine, if I ask you what country you think successful, or even what state in United States is successful, you probably will think, well, Silicon Valley is successful, New York is successful, or Texas at least, in terms of oil and in terms of resource-based industries is successful. But you won't think of India as a successful country. They do have some successful, of course, but again, mostly related to IT and healthcare industry specialists, and that actually related to a skilled labor. They have a lot of skilled labor in the sector of IT and healthcare. That's what make them successful, not because they have tons of people that are not skilled. And so this assumption is one of the most outdated. We really have economy based on skills, where one person with unique skills is worth a million of people without skills, because that person can produce those goods and services using capital, using technology, can produce more than a million people that have no skills. That's the world we live in. And that's why you all went to college as well, to get the skills. Because if you have no skills in this world, you have no future. So unlike economic theory that tells us that everyone is the same, we all know that's not true. That also creates another problem with this labor, that not all industries are the same within the country. Because of the different skills, we have high demand for certain industries where there are no problems with labor, but IT employs only, I believe, 5% of people. Yeah, something around that. And finance, that takes, as I mentioned, when we talk about the overall economy, finance is number one now industry or sector. It holds 20% of economy in value added or in GDP. It actually has 50% of all corporate profits in the country, but it employs less than 5% of people. I believe actually even way less than 5%. And on the contrary, we have machinery, we actually have the trade, retail trade, like Walmart, Costco. Walmart, I believe, is now number one employer. It's no longer General Motors. It used to be General Motors. Ford, so car manufacturers, those companies are not that successful in terms of innovations and in terms of capital, but they are feeding industries. They feed people. They employ thousands and dozens of thousands of people. While IT industry, yes, it's successful in terms of capital. It generates a lot of capital, but it employs a handful of people. And in this world, actually relies a lot of imported experts, so not just immigrants, but actually offices in developing countries, like in India, as I mentioned, India and other countries. So it's those industries, yeah, they are successful in their terms, and we like all those products. But from a macroeconomic perspective, remember, we need to employ the people, and they don't employ a lot of people. So as a government, we have this obligation basically to support industries that are not that successful. And one of the examples is coal mining. Not just in US, it's an issue. In Ukraine as well. Ukraine has large coal mines, and coal mining is one of the top industries as well. Actually, it's larger than in United States relatively to the economy. And coal mining is not profitable at all in Ukraine or in US. In US, it might be profitable after we reduce the environmental regulations, but in general, it is not profitable. And that's why government still has support those industries, because, just a second, I need to pause. There will be another video to continue with that.